What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and you guys loved yesterday's video where we looked at redraft default rankings and compared them to high stakes ADP and found the best value in every round of your fantasy draft. Today, we are going to identify the worst pick in every round of your fantasy draft because your league mates are going to show up to your draft using not ADP, but the default rankings on these platforms. And these are usually made by experts and analysts that are on these sites. They're outdated usually and very easy to exploit when we cross-reference them with real paid money leagues. So today, we're going to go round by round and identify the worst pick in every round of your Sleeper, Yahoo, and ESPN Fantasy League. As you guys are about to see, this video took a ton of time, so all I ask is that if you enjoy, go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go. Now, we had a little bit of an issue with yesterday's video. A lot of people pointed out in the comments, like Joe here, the ESPN default rankings we were using, again, we're not using ADP in this video. We're using those default preloaded rankings on each of these sites. ESPN is so weird. I use their top 300 PPR cheat sheet, which previously had been their default rankings. Recently, they just changed to their projections tab, which is just very weird. So then we have to go there. And what those rankings look like is this. I had to go here into another mock draft, compile all of this one by one, put it into a Google Sheet. So then we compiled the new ESPN default rankings, the correct ones, and then we added as well Sleeper and Yahoo, the three most popular platforms you guys are drafting off of. Now, we need something to cross-reference these with that are actually sharp ADP with real money on the line, and we went to the NFC. This is a high-stakes platform. It is fairly vanilla, full PPR, 3 wide receiver, 1 flex, managed league, 12-team league, and there's real money on the line. It's a high-stakes league. We're actually going to be streaming one of these tonight, a high-stakes draft at like 10 p.m., so make sure you check that out as well. But to me, this is the most, this is what a home league that's really, really sharp would look like, and that makes it a really good ADP to cross-reference with soft default rankings on these sites, right? Like, these look about right. Like, even the running backs are still a little bit pushed up, right? Like, 3rd round Pacheco, 4th round Rashad White, James Cook, Josh Jacobs. It looks about right to me. I will say it's 3rd round reversal, but for the sake of ADP, that doesn't matter, right? Nico Collins is on the other side of the board, but he's still the 25th pick, so it's not going to affect our data. Now, that then brings us to this sheet here, where I took NFC high stakes ADP. I took ESPN default rankings, Sleeper default rankings, and Yahoo default rankings, and put them all into one master rankings matrix that will be down below in the comment section. This is a new updated version, again, where we now have the correct ESPN default rankings in there. And all I ask, I'm not putting this info behind a paywall. All I ask simply is that if you use it, if you go down below and you download it, leave a like on this video and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. Now, I will say as well, the old ESPN rankings are still on there. It's just hidden within the page. And I will also say, anybody out there that has experience with API, hit me up in DMs on either Discord or Twitter, and maybe I'll find a way to keep this updated throughout the entire summer. Now, this screenshot is a little bit loaded here. This is just for an example, the first 7 picks of the 3rd round here. I just want to sort of outline what's happening in this picture, right? You have each player, you have their pick that is highlighted in yellow, and that is just simply the consensus ranking, but in pick form. And what consensus is it's an average of the ESPN default rankings, the Sleeper rankings, and the Yahoo rankings in an average form. So consensus is just kind of like what an average home league is going to look like. People aren't going to draft directly off of each ranking, but it should be within that range. So the pick is just me sorting it and then assigning pick values next to it. And then you have the ESPN rankings, the Sleeper rankings, the Yahoo rankings, and the value columns here are just NFC ADP, high stakes, subtracted by each ranking. So you can see the players that are big values and the players that aren't values. So by this list, you can see like Nico Collins is a good value, Kelsey isn't a great value. So then we're going to break it down round by round and go through the players that I think are the worst picks. Now, it's not just going to be me sorting through and finding the worst valued player. It's going to be a mix of both. A player I think is both overpriced and not a great bet to make in fantasy football. And first up, we're going to have Jonathan Taylor here. I will say he's a 1st round pick. So he's not someone I'm like full on fading. Every player is a 1st round pick for a reason, or every player that is a 1st round pick is one for a reason. But Jonathan Taylor is a little bit overpriced. He is a consensus top 10 pick. He's the 110, going as the 109 on ESPN, but in high stakes leagues, he's like the 112 or the 201. He's more of a 1-2 turn pick, and I think he's a mistake to make at the 109 or 110, I wouldn't draft him there for the sole reason, not even that Jonathan Taylor's a bad pick or a bad play, but the scarcity of wide receiver I think is more important to take here, knowing the running back options you'll have when you come back around in that early second. Because when we look at the running back tiers here, to me, it's McCaffrey, it's Breece, it's Bijan, and then I would have JT through Achane in the same tier. We have a lot of guys that are kind of volume dependent. You have some guys that are efficiency dependent. I love Jonathan Taylor, but he doesn't have that same ceiling as Bijan, Breece, and McCaffrey because of the lack of receiving upside, and touchdown upside is a little bit capped here with Anthony Richardson at quarterback. But then at wide receiver, you have Lamb, Tyreek, Chase, Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Puka. And then to me, a pretty huge tier gap to like a rookie in Marvin Harrison Jr., Devontae Adams and Olave, target hogs in bad offenses. Drake London has never finished inside the top 24. And this list to me, like that tier extends all the way through the third round of like Debo, Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, Malik Neighbors, DJ Moore, all of those guys. So I have a tough time. If you take Jonathan Taylor at the 110 and you come back around to the 202 and Puka Nacua is gone, you're now either doubling up on running back or you're grabbing a wide receiver that's not that great. Like if you go Jonathan Taylor, Marvin Harrison Jr., your team has zero edge over a Breece Hall, Devontae Adams team. It is the same team, but they have a tier 1 running back and a tier 2 or a tier 4 receiver, and then you have a tier 2 running back and a tier 4 receiver. So your team is just a lesser version of that team. Personally, I would rather have Garrett Wilson and then Kyron Williams. So then you have you have a tier 2 running back and a tier 3 receiver. At least Garrett Wilson is a tier ahead of the wide receivers that Breece Hall, Bijan, and McCaffrey teams can get in the back half of that second round. So that's how I'm thinking through it. Again, it's not even so much JT. It is that in the second round, wide receiver falls off so much that the only first round running backs I'm really aiming for are McCaffrey, Breece, and Bijan, or else I'm taking a receiver and then getting a running back in round 2. Now, speaking of round 2, one of the running backs I'm not taking in round 2 is going to be Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is the consensus 204, which feels very steep. To me, he's just somebody that's a big name and is going to get overdrafted in home leagues because he's Derrick Henry. He's beloved. He's a big name player. He's going 202 on Yahoo. He's going 206 on ESPN. That sleeper value is not bad, the 21st pick, but he is going on high stakes as the 23rd overall player. So right at the 2-3 turn. So early second feels really steep to me. This is an aging running back coming off his first finish outside the top 12 in points per game since 2018. He's already 30 years old. He's just a huge risk, and there's not a ton of payoff here, right? Like, I get he's in a better offense, but even if you take his splits from last year where he had 19.9 points per game in his wins, 11.6 points per game in his losses, and you extrapolate that out to Baltimore's 10.5 win total, we're still talking about just 16.7 points per game, which would have been the RB7 last year, even with 15 touchdowns and, again, 10.5 wins. So if your ceiling is like 17 points per game and your floor is 30-year-old running back coming off one of the worst years of his career, I have a tough time there. If I'm going to take a running back in the second round, it wouldn't be Derrick Henry. I would take Saquon over him, who I'm not even that high on, Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, Kyron Williams, all of those guys over Derrick Henry, especially at the 204, which feels very steep. Now, I also wanted to cover Chris Olave. He's technically here a good value, but here's why he's not a great value. And I do want to show Underdog Fantasy, which is a wide receiver heavy format, of course. And I will say as well, they're also a great spot just to get practice where you can hop on Underdog Fantasy. We're streaming every single night from now through kickoff. Sometimes we do underdog drafts, sometimes we do high stakes. But when we do underdog drafts, it's a great way just to get prepared for your home league where you can see how the market kind of has these players priced up. You can kind of get a feel of like, okay, so this is what this market looks like versus home leagues. You can sort of get a feel for what players should be going where, especially in the wide receiver department where a guy like Malik Neighbors is getting way pushed up and he's getting way pushed down in home leagues. You can kind of see, okay, a wide receiver hungry market really likes Malik Neighbors. I should kind of store that in the back of my head. So you can find that Underdog Fantasy, use promo code ROUND to match your first deposit up to $250. You can find the link to find Underdog Fantasy down below in the description and the comment section. But with Chris Olave, I think this is the other utility of Underdog is if Chris Olave is picked 21, again, in a really wide receiver heavy format in best ball on Underdog, why the hell would I pay pick 21 prices in my home league, right? Like, if in the most wide receiver hungry format out there, I have to pay the 21st pick for Chris Olave, why would I pay the 21st pick for Chris Olave in my home league where it is a way more running back hungry format? And we just talked about the wide receiver tiers versus running back tiers. If Chris Olave is on the board and then so is a Kyron or an Achane or really any of those running backs in the second round, I think that you could even talk me into like Pacheco, ETN, Saquon, any of those guys. I would just do that and then come back around in the third round knowing the values we're going to have later, where we can see here Nico Collins is a value. Like I kind of just highlighted in green the values I like. We have Nico Collins, Debo, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, Cooper Kupp. Those are just our third round guys. And then in the fourth round, you have Devontae Smith, Malik Neighbors. So if I know that those guys are waiting for me in the third and fourth round, why would I take Chris Olave in the second round over really good running back options out there? Then we have a similar deal here to Chris Olave in the third round in Michael Pittman, who again shows up as a value, but he's really not. Like, pick 20 on ESPN is absurd for Michael Pittman. And again, we can sort of cross-reference this with Underdog here, and we can see Michael Pittman is the 36th overall pick on Underdog, a wide receiver heavy format. He is consensus pick 32. For whatever reason, in your home league, Michael Pittman is more expensive than in the wide receiver hungry Underdog, which is just crazy to me. And he is the wide receiver 25 on Underdog, and he is the wide receiver 16 in consensus ADP. So while he looks like a value here where, he's the 307 by consensus and he's the 301 in high stakes, this is actually one of the few players I think high stakes is out of their mind for valuing. And you can see around Michael Pittman, give me the value on Nico Collins, Debo, DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Jalen Waddle, Cooper Kupp, especially Jalen Waddle and Cooper Kupp, to be honest, just based on these Underdog rankings here. But Michael Pittman, I just can't get behind. He is a guy with an 8.6 yard career ADOT. That is like rivaling someone like Jarvis Landry. There's no touchdown upside for him. This is Shane Steichen's offense with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, one of the highest red zone passing rates or rushing rates in the league with Shane Steichen. So you're going to get no touchdowns for Pittman. You now have a scrambling quarterback, not a check it down Charlie and Gardner Minshew. Anthony Richardson had one of the highest ADOTs in all of college football when he played at Florida a couple years ago. I just don't really see Michael Pittman paying off in the third round, especially knowing, like, we're going to go through here, and there's so much wide receiver value over these next few rounds that in the third round, taking Michael Pittman, it's just not good process to me. Again, he is very much like a floor player receiver. You're going to get a lot of value later. Like, even if you look on the left-hand side of the screen here, Tank Dell is a fifth-round pick. Stephon Diggs is a fourth-round pick. Devontae Smith is a fourth-round pick in your home leagues. Malik Neighbors is a fifth-round pick in your home league. So spending a third-round pick on Michael Pittman, the wide receiver 25, is just a no-go for me personally. Now, the fourth-rounder that I think is the worst pick right now is Alvin Kamara. He's not as bad on Sleeper and Yahoo, but I still think he's pretty bad. Like, in my rankings, I have him pretty buried. Like, I even think, again, his high stakes ADP of like 52 is too much. To me, he is just very much a big name, kind of like Derrick Henry. People are going to recognize the name Alvin Kamara for what he's done in the past, but we're now talking about an aging running back who's not all that good. We look at his efficiency here. Shout out to Jacob Gibbs. You can see his missed tackles forced per touch by season has just declined every single year. And last year, he was sixth worst. And then if we look here, the wide receiver value that you're passing up on, it's just not good. The fourth round, if you pass up on any of these guys for Alvin Kamara, I think that's a mistake. Like Diggs, Devontae Smith, Malik Neighbors, all smashes over Kamara. Flowers, Dell, Amari Cooper, T. Higgins. And then I think, like, if you want to take Alvin Kamara in the sixth round, go for it. But to me, when we talk about dead zone running backs that are just projected volume, Alvin Kamara fits that build for me as just a projected volume back. The efficiency is gone. The Alvin Kamara we once knew, sadly, is no longer there. And then similar deal with Aaron Jones. You're going to see a lot of running backs here, but once we get to rounds 4 through 6, that is effectively the dead zone in your home leagues, as we've been talking about all summer long. And you get Aaron Jones here. This one's pretty brutal. He's like a 6th-round pick in high stakes. I'd really be more comfortable with him at like the 6-7 turn. But you can see on ESPN, he is literally a 5th-round pick. On Sleeper, he's a 5th-round pick. Yahoo's a 5th-round pick. And we're still passing up really good wide receiver options here that I just can't get behind, where you're passing up on Tank Dell, T. Higgins, Amari Cooper. I just can't get there. That's a lot of wide receiver value you're passing up on. And hopefully, again, if you're fading guys like Chris Olave in the second, you already have your running back firepower so that you can take some receivers in this range. And even some tight ends and quarterbacks maybe fall in this range. And Aaron Jones, the issue is here. He's 29 years old. He missed 6 games due to injury last year. He had like a nagging hamstring all season long. He did sort of light up down the stretch, but this is a team that loves Ty Chandler. This is also a guy changing teams late in his career, and this is something we've been bringing up all offseason long with Dwayne McFarland, where when running backs switch teams, they see a lower year-over-year correlation in PPR points, rush attempts, routes, and targets. So lower production and roles that we didn't expect them to have. Aaron Jones could just fall right off a cliff Ty Chandler can make this an even split, and Aaron Jones could just be like not even startable in fantasy football. You also now have J.J. McCarthy hurt, so that lowers the ceiling of this offense. To me, in the 5th round, it's just a pretty brutal pick. And then that takes us to the 6th round here. We actually have a 2-for-1 special. We have Zamir White and Joe Burrow. Zamir White is the 602. On the NFC, he's like an early 7th. He's probably fine at his 75th ranking on Sleeper, but ESPN and Yahoo is pretty brutal for me. Zamir White, again, in this dead zone, there's going to be a lot of wide receiver value in this 6th round, and I just can't get behind 5-6 turns Zamir White, where he is very much a poster boy to be a dead zone back, where he is just a running back that hasn't really done much yet, is being pushed up due to volume in a bad offense in the Raiders. That's just something I don't want a piece of when I can get Najee Harris in the 7th, Jalen Warren or Javonte Williams in the 8th, Chase Brown in the 9th. All of these wide receiver values are going to dry up by then. So to me, I'm all right on Zamir White. And then also Joe Burrow. And it's actually nothing to do with Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow is actually completely fine. But we just know from guys like J.J. Zacharyson that have developed the late quarterback theory or the late round quarterback theory, paying up for quarterback isn't great. I will say, in this modern era, I think Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, those are the elite quarterbacks I want. And if it's not one of them, I'd rather wait, because all of these quarterbacks get pushed up where, you know, Mahomes in the 4th versus Joe Burrow in the 6th is a massive, massive gap. It should really be more like Joe Burrow in the 8th, like he is on NFC. And this is still NFC, where this high-stakes league is 6-point passing touchdowns, and it's 20 rounds. That means waiver wire is super thin, meaning you can't stream quarterback as effectively, and 6-point passing touchdowns is going to actually benefit a guy like Joe Burrow. And even still, the high-stakes market is about 15.2 picks lower than consensus. So again, it's not really like an issue with Joe Burrow. It's just like I'd rather wait and get like Jordan Love in round 8, or you can get like Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams in round 9, 10. And we even saw last year, you could get a guy like CJ Stroud or Jordan Love off of waivers and just stream them the rest of the year. So I think paying up in the 6th round and passing on guys like Terry McLaurin, George Kittle, Kyle Pitts, Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, Rashee Rice, to name a few in your home league, it's just not great to me. Again, I would just prefer your Jordan Love in round 8, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams in round 9 or 10, and just be good to go if I miss out on one of those top-end elite quarterbacks. I will say, too, if a Richardson or a Stroud gets you in the 6th round, they're fine as well, but I do know some of these sites are pushing up Richardson into like the 4th round. I can't quite get there. After that, we have the 7th round here with Tony Pollard. He is the consensus 7-10. And that's just a little bit steep. I just think that there's better value later, especially with his running mate, Tyjae Spears, going another round or so later on. This is actually a really good tweet from Dynasty Zoltan FF, where he compared the yards per touch, the yards per carry, the missed tackles forced from Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard. Tyjae Spears blows him completely out of the water. And then you also have a bad environment where this is going to be like a bottom 10 offense where Will Levis might not be good. DeAndre Hopkins is hurt. The offense is going to run through Calvin Ridley and the tandem of Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard with Will Levis at quarterback. That's not great. The offensive line isn't great either. So it's just not a great offense. And we saw what Tony Pollard did last year in like an actual good offense. Maybe he rebounds, but at this point in his career, when we're into the later part of our 20s, I'm not all that convinced that he's going to bounce back from an efficiency standpoint. Then we have Zach Moss, who's going at the 804 in your home league as a pretty brutal value. He's going out to the top 100 picks in high stakes right now. He is somebody that you have to pay up for the 86th pick over on ESPN. And I think Zach Moss isn't awful. Like, he's a decent bet to be this year's Gus Edwards and just benefit from falling in the end zone on a really good offense. But we have the data from these paid leagues that now we have Chase Brown as the RB1 in Cincy on both underdog and high stakes right now. So why would we take Zach Moss in the 8th when we can get the guy in leagues with money on the line the market prefers in Chase Brown a full round and a half later? So that's really what it comes down to. I think they're both fine, but I would rather, you can take Rome Odunze in the 8th and pair him with Chase Brown instead of taking Zach Moss and then pairing him with like Rashid Shaheed in the 10th round. So that's kind of the give and take you have to think through there. If the paid market is going to prefer a running back that the consensus still hasn't caught up to yet, I would just rather play it through Chase Brown, a guy with a lot of juice. He also led all running backs last year in mile per hour tracking, despite the crazy Devon Achane year. So Chase Brown is a really fun pick as well that we mentioned yesterday. And then same thing with Zeke Elliott, where if we look at Rico Dowdle, his running back mate in Dallas, one of these two guys should crush, right? Dallas is going to be a good offense. They have a good offensive line. They should score touchdowns. Whoever's going to be the lead back is going to crush. And Zeke Elliott at this point is pretty dusty. He's pretty old. He's really just getting pushed up into the 907 area in your home league because he is a known name, as with honestly a lot of these guys on this list. But Rico Dowdle is lesser known, and he is actually getting drafted ahead of Zeke Elliott in high stakes and also ahead of Zeke Elliott over on underdog. So when money's on the line and sharp people are drafting, they prefer Rico Dowdle. So again, why draft Zeke Elliott in the 9th round when you can just take Rico Dowdle in the 11th round or the 10th round instead, someone that the market actually prefers over Zeke Elliott. So to me, Zeke Elliott, even though he's someone I'm drafting like the 11th round, in the 9th round in your home league, I can't get there on Zeke Elliott. Then we have our round 10 plus players, and these are all wide receivers because all offseason long, we preach the idea we want to be stacking our flex spots, especially in these leagues where there's so much wide receiver value, right? We're getting guys like Xavier Worthy, Rome Odunze in the 8th round. You're getting guys even later than like Brian Thomas and Keon Coleman in the 9th round. And I can just go on and on. Rashee Rice in the 7th round, Terry McLaurin in the 6th. Like, there's so much wide receiver across the board that you need to be done drafting wide receivers by the time you get to round 10, or else you're going to have guys like Tyler Lockett or Rashid Shaheed in your flex spot, and that's just building a bad team. So if you want to make sure that you're getting enough wide receiver firepower through your flex spot, make sure you check out patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You can find that in the description or the comment section down below, pinned at the top. And I have my top 200 rankings cheat sheet set up in a way so that it's pushing up those legendary running backs, right, like Bijan, Brees, McCaffrey. It's also pushing up those round 2 running backs like Kyron and like Devon Achane, so you're drafting them over your Marvin Harrisons and your Drake Londons, and just setting up your team for success early on, targeting those wide receivers in the middle rounds, and then pushing back up again your Chase Brown, Zach Charbonnets, Rico Dowdle, Ty Chandler, Jalen Wrights, Ray Davis. All of those running backs are like fun upside swings in that round 10, 11, 12, 13 range. So you're drafting them instead of drafting like Tyler Lockett and Rashid Shaheed or Mike Williams, because we don't really like those guys. I would rather have my team set up in a spot where instead of trying to draft next year's Adam Thielen, who does well early and then fizzles out by the playoffs, because a lot of these veteran receivers, that's what they do. They start out hot, then they fizzle out. I want the opposite, so that we're optimizing for fantasy championships, right? Like last year, Rashee Rice, Jaden Reed, these rookie wide receivers that by the time they get full route shares and they get onto the field, they end up being league winners down the stretch in the fantasy playoffs, unlike the veterans. So I want my wide receivers to be in a spot that I don't have to really rely on these guys early, right? Like nobody wants to rely on Jalen Polk or A.D. Mitchell to go into your flex spot or Xavier Legette and give you points early on. But I do want to have enough wide receivers where I can then stash those guys along with the running backs and other people's handcuffs, so that as the chaos of the season goes on and rookie wide receivers ascend depth charts and handcuffs get thrusted into starting roles with running back injuries, my team gets stronger instead of kind of these flash in the pan veterans that most of the time give you a couple weeks early on and then kind of fizzle out. In specific, I don't love Tyler Lockett as a guy who last year, it was his first year since 2018 below 1,000 receiving yards. That's not good. It's just going to be tough. He's a spike week guy as well. He's like better in best ball. In your home league, you're never going to know when to start him. Similar deal with Mike Williams. He's going to be a spike week guy. And he just is about to turn 30 in October. He just tore his ACL. You have a Jets offense that's going to run through Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. I just don't know how much is going to be left over from Mike Williams. And then Rashid Shaheed is like a fun upside guy, but also his career 17% target per route run is never going to be enough volume to be a weekly starter. He's never going to get enough alongside Chris Olave in what's going to be a bad offense. So these are just 3 guys in Lockett, Shaheed, Mike Williams in like that 10th, 11th round area that I would prefer not relying on, and instead getting these rookie flyers later on like A.D. Mitchell, Jalen Polk, Xavier Legette, really anybody. You can put Ricky Pearsall in there if you want. You can also put like year 2 breakouts like Dontavion Wicks out there, someone that I wouldn't really want to start early on, but should be a good pick down the stretch, and then again alongside those handcuffs. So that is going to do it for us today. I'll make sure that as soon as this video goes out, I'm going to take this new spreadsheet that we made and actually like just paste it into the one that I put in yesterday's video, so that now it's all going to be in the same sheet, fully updated. Again, I went by hand to ESPN, put them into this sheet. So all I ask is that for the data, for the info, for the effort, just go down below, leave a like, subscribe, catch the stream tonight, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, oh, oh.